In a bathtub, John wakes up and realizes he has amnesia. He looks at himself in the mirror and notices a wound in his forehead. After putting on the clothes he finds nearby, he looks around the room for clues. John finds some keys and a briefcase with the initials KH. Inside there are more clothes and a postcard from Shell Beach, which triggers memories of visiting that place as a child. Suddenly a telephone starts ringing and John picks it up. It's Dr. Daniel, who explains John's memory was erased because of a failed experiment and now there are some men looking for him, so he needs to leave immediately. John wants to know more but he hangs up when he sees something behind the bed. He comes closer and is horrified to find a dead woman with bleeding scars that are shaped like spirals. There's also a blood-stained knife on the table. He immediately runs out of the room and discovers he's in a hotel. The elevator stops and reveals a group of pale creepy beings known as the Strangers, so John runs downstairs. When he reaches the lobby, John notices every person is asleep, even the receptionist and the woman on the phone. She falls when he opens the door as if she was dead. Suddenly the clock strikes 12 and everyone wakes up, not realizing they were asleep at all. The receptionist calls John by his name and mentions he paid for 3 weeks, so he'll need more money if he plans to stay longer. After quickly checking the reservation book to learn his own name and address, John leaves the hotel without paying and throws the suitcase in the river. As he walks through the streets, he notices that his fingertips have spirals on them. In the hotel, the receptionist goes to John's room to empty it and is pushed against the wall by the Strangers, who have found a mysterious syringe on the ground. They ask about John and when the receptionist says he left, they touch his face to put him to sleep. Meanwhile, Emma is working as a singer at a bar. After her performance, a coworker tells her a guy left a card for her saying he was her husband's doctor. Emma follows the address and meets Daniel, who is experimenting with a rat in a maze. Emma is John's wife and she hasn't seen him in 3 weeks after a serious fight. Daniel says John is going through a psychotic break and has complete memory loss, so he may be delusional and even violent. He thinks John will contact Emma soon and wants her to call him as soon as that happens. Soon Inspector Frank and a few cops arrive at the hotel to investigate the murder. This is the 6th naughty worker with spiral scars in the last month and now John is the main suspect. Detective Eddie tries to join the investigation, but the cops quickly kick him out because he keeps talking about some strange beings watching them, so they think he's crazy. Later at the police station, Frank gets the fingerprint results and notices their spirals. At that moment Emma arrives to report her husband is missing and Frank has to tell her John may be a killer. Back to John, he enters a restaurant that looks familiar and the server immediately recognizes him because he forgot his wallet a few days ago. The server puts the wallet behind one of the many food windows, but John doesn't know how to operate them. At that moment 2 officers come in and John gets so desperate that he activates some kind of mind power that breaks the window open. After taking his wallet, he tries to leave the restaurant but he's stopped by the cops. As they ask questions, a woman called May comes in and says he's with her, so the cops let them go. May takes John to her apartment and while she changes, he checks the wallet to discover Emma's picture. He then realizes May is a naughty worker but before he can do anything, he notices she has a daughter and leaves. As he wanders around, he sees a sign promoting Shell Beach, which matches his postcard. He takes a closer look while checking his pockets and finds all the newspaper articles detailing the murders. John falls in shock as he realizes he did it. At that moment the Strangers show up and try to use their hand trick to put him to sleep, but John is immune. Then a stranger takes out a knife and tries to attack, however the wood platform breaks under him and he falls. The other Strangers are also armed and trigger John's power, which breaks more wood. Another stranger falls and gets stuck in some rope that chokes him. The first stranger flies back to the platform and tries using his knife, so John steps out of the way and falls into the hole too. He holds onto the rope and the weight affects the sign's gears, which causes part of it to fall and cut the stranger's head open. The resulting noise makes the last stranger feel unbearable pain. When John climbs back up, he sees a gooey creature come out of the dead stranger and the noises it makes as it dies blow up the lights. John uses the chance to quickly run away. Later at the stranger's hideout, they discuss John's power. They say he's capable of tuning and that something called imprinting didn't work. Daniel hasn't called them with any news, so they decide to search for John themselves. At home, Emma comes out of the shower and is shocked to find John waiting at the table. He doesn't remember her, he only came to this address because he read it in the hotel book and the keys worked. Emma gives him Daniel's card before explaining John left their place after discovering she was having an affair. John tells her that he was with May and didn't get any violent thoughts, so he doesn't think he's the killer. When he looks out the window, he notices a police car and immediately runs away, but Frank appears in the corridor to arrest him. Emma pushes Frank to distract him and John jumps to the lower floors to escape faster. As Frank jumps to chase him, John finds himself in a room with no exit. However, a door magically appears on the wall and John gets to leave the building. When Frank arrives at the same room, the door is gone, but he finds Daniel's card on the ground. Afterward, John takes a cab and notices the driver has a souvenir from Shell Beach, so he asks how to get there. The driver feels confused because he can't remember the beach's location even though he's been there many times. The cab drops John at Daniel's building and he watches Frank trying to interrogate the doctor, But Daniel doesn't give him any information. John begins following him. Moments later, Daniel is in the bathhouse when he's approached by a stranger, who shows him the syringe he found in John's room. Daniel explains he tried to imprint John, but he woke up and knocked the syringe off his hand before running away. He assures the stranger that John doesn't have any memories, only glimpses, but the stranger worries because John can tune, which means he has the same power as strangers do. The man decides they won't imprint John and they must catch him for another purpose. While they chat, John is sneaking around and hearing everything. He checks Daniel's suitcase and sees the syringes. On his way out, the stranger changes the location of the pool ladder just to make Daniel swim more. In the meantime, Frank visits Eddie, who keeps drawing spirals on the walls. Eddie went crazy after working on a very strange case, and now he says he spends his days riding the subway in circles. He claims he thinks in circles too and mentions that there's no way out. Memory problems are also part of his issues, not to mention he doesn't think the woman in the house is his real wife and doubts the identity of everyone he knows. When Frank asks about the case, Eddie freaks out, saying there never was a case and it's all a big joke. Moments later, John watches Daniel approach an old building and a door appears for the doctor to come in, but John can't follow him anymore. Inside, the strangers are cataloging different objects and Daniel uses them to create a serum that alters memories. Suddenly the strangers make him float and demand to know why John wasn't asleep in the hotel. Daniel has no idea, but he theorizes John is adapting and evolving. He blames this on the human soul, which is what the strangers are looking for. Since it's about to be midnight, all the strangers gather in the middle of their hideout and wait for their big clock to strike 12. When it happens, every person in the city instantly falls asleep and every machine stops working, including cars and clocks. John is the only one awake and freaks out when he sees the world freeze. He tries to wake the people up but nobody reacts. In the headquarters, the strangers announce it's time to tune and activate a machine that makes dozens of tall structures come out of the ground all over the city. Then John sees the strangers and Daniel come out of the hideout with the bodies of sleeping humans, who are dropped at different buildings and get a serum injection in their foreheads. The building rooms change when these people get the injection, giving them a new life. Some of them get richer, others get a new job. Even the kids are affected by this. When Daniel is done, John catches him on his way out and starts shaking him, demanding an explanation. Since Daniel refuses to answer, John gets angry and accidentally activates his powers, which send Daniel flying. Unimpressed, Daniel tells John he has the tuning, which is the power the strangers use to make the buildings change. He offers to help him control it, but at the moment the strangers come out and John has to run away. In the headquarters, the clock is put away and the city awakens. The people who were injected now believe the memories from the serum have been their real lives all along. As he wakes up, Frank notices there's a spiral in his coffee that looks exactly like John's fingerprint. The following night, Daniel creates a new serum that contains John's memories, which should allow them to track his movements. Mr. Hand volunteers as a test subject, so he's tied up to a device before Daniel injects him. Hand's body squirms as his brain is overwhelmed with John's memories of his entire life, but he survives the experience and is ready to hunt. Afterward, they float through the city and break into May's house to ask her about John, taking out a knife to make her talk. Meanwhile, John reads the back of the postcard and notices it's signed by someone called Carl Harris, whose name matches the initials on the suitcase. He looks for the name in the yellow pages and finds an address, so he gets directions from a newspaper stand and takes the subway. During the trip, he finds Shell Beach on the subway map and immediately changes lines to go there instead. However, no matter what subway he takes, he can't find a way to reach the outer stations. Eddie is nearby and hears John talk to a guard, so he points out there's no way to leave the city, which he knows because he's already tried. He explains he used to be a cop, but the strangers like swapping memories and professions among people, yet they aren't aware of this. Eddie remembers because he woke up in the middle of the process just like John did, and now he announces he's found a way out. John watches in shock how a train finishes the poor man. Moments later, the strangers follow John's tracks to Emma's home. Mr. Hand finds her watching the river and they have a philosophical conversation about memories making humans who they are. After getting more visions of John's life with Emma, Hand leaves. Remembering John's story, Emma goes to May's apartment, where she finds her dead with spiral scars. She's about to run away when she's suddenly caught by Frank, who now suspects her as well. Then they find May's daughter hiding under the bed and a drawing representing the stranger's arrival. Eventually, John finds Carl's address, which is an aquarium. Nobody comes out when he yells, so he breaks the front window to go inside. He enters a dark room and is threatened by Carl, who puts down his weapon as soon as he recognizes John. Carl is John's uncle and has many pictures of his childhood, including his hometown Shell Beach. John's family died when the house burned down and Carl doesn't remember how to get to that place. John notices the pictures are bright and realizes the sun has never risen in this city, it's always dark. One of the pictures shows that John burnt his arm in the fire, but he doesn't have a scar now, which means everything is a lie. He still agrees to spend the night in his old room and finds a journal he wrote as a kid about Shell Beach, but it's empty. At the same time, Carl secretly calls Emma to tell her where her husband is, but John overhears him and escapes through the window. Emma passes the information to Frank and they leave together to look for him. unaware that Hand is following them. At that moment clocks strike 12 and everyone falls asleep. The strangers find John and begin transforming the stairs he's on to try to stop him. John keeps on running anyway, reaching the roof and jumping from building to building as the city transforms around him. Suddenly Mr. Hand blocks his way and tries to attack, but John punches him to knock him down and steals his knife. John threatens Hand to make him talk and learns that the strangers have built this city using people's stolen memories from a variety of time periods. Every night they refine it to learn what makes people human since the strangers want to be like them. Then Hand begins teasing John with his memories before revealing that the strangers are the gooey creatures that John saw the other night, and they use dead human bodies as their vessels. He tries to choke John, but at that moment the roof transforms and throws them both off. John manages to hold on to a balcony and sees more strangers coming after him, not to mention there's a building coming closer. A desperate John breaks the window and hides in the room behind him before the two buildings crash into each other, killing one of the strangers. The other stranger also goes inside and chases John through the corridors. John runs until he finds a door that he opens after some struggle, only to almost fall off the building. He holds on to the edge and the stranger bites his hand, making him bleed. Thankfully there's a structure growing nearby and John manages to jump on it to escape through the roofs again. As the tuning time ends and everyone wakes up, John lands in an alley and is surrounded by strangers. However, Frank and Emma show up in a car and quickly take him away. Later at the police station, Frank interrogates John, showing him pictures of the bodies in the Shell Beach book. To John's surprise, the pages now have drawings. He points out the lack of sunlight and people having no memories to prove something strange is going on, but Frank doesn't believe him. Next, John uses his power to make the book float, leaving Frank in shock. Afterward, John is allowed to talk to Emma and tells her he isn't mad about the affair anymore because the memories aren't real. He also says their marriage isn't real either, yet Emma feels that her love for him is real. John uses his power to break the glass and kiss her, but the cops take him away. Suddenly the strangers burst into the station and put all the cops to sleep. Then they force the captain to take them to John, but when they open the cell he's already gone. Hand kills the captain to deal with his anger. At the bathhouse, John confronts Daniel again and gets him to talk. Daniel explains the entire city is the strangers' experiment and that he hides there because they hate water. He also confirms John isn't a murderer and offers to inject him again to get the rest of the truth. Suddenly Frank appears and holds Daniel at gunpoint, revealing he's released John so they could find the truth together. The duo drags Daniel into Frank's car and begins driving toward Shell Beach, telling the doctor to guide them there. When Daniel tries to refuse, saying there's nothing there, John tortures him with his power until he agrees. When they reach the river, they notice the bridge is gone. Daniel tries to run away, so John kicks him down and announces they'll continue on a boat. Meanwhile, Emma enters her apartment and discovers all her things are gone, but the strangers are there and Hand calls her Anna. Emma tries to escape only for Hand to block her way. Back to the boat, Daniel is sharing the story of what happened. The strangers are aliens who abducted a bunch of humans and brought them to this dark city as an experiment. They mix and match their memories to try to understand what makes humans unique and hopefully learn how to get a soul. The strangers share a collective mind and their race is on the brink of extinction, so they think human souls can save them. They're afraid of light, that's why it's always dark in their city. Daniel was forced to cooperate because the aliens didn't know how to experiment with the human mind since they couldn't understand it, but he was forced to erase his own memories. All the memories John has are fake, and the drawings on the notebook were created recently by his powers. Eventually they reach the outer walls and discover Shell Beach is just a sign. Daniel insists there's nothing beyond the city, but Frank and John start breaking down the wall anyway. They almost fall through the resulting hole and are shocked to see outer space on the other side, which confirms humans the alien story. At that moment the strangers arrive with Emma and Frank opens fire, killing a few of them. When a stranger tries to attack John, Frank fights him and they accidentally fall through the hole, floating away to their deaths. John wants to keep fighting but Hand threatens to kill Emma, so he surrenders and lets Hand put him to sleep. Moments later John wakes up tied to a device in the stranger's hideout. The crowd wants him dead, but the leader announces the experiment is over and that John will be imprinted with the stranger's memories so they can share his soul. Daniel pretends to start the process, but instead he injects a series of memories that show the doctor teaching John how to control the tuning and use his power to its full capacity. Suddenly John opens his eyes and destroys the device with just a thought. Then he uses his powers to push back the strangers and free Daniel from a device too. Soon the leader retaliates with his own powers and a fight ensues. John and the stranger keep pushing each other and destroying the room they're in, so the other strangers run in panic. The metal creates spikes and rising structures while the electricity begins shocking any stranger it can reach. John's and the leader's powers crash in the middle of the room, causing the whole building to shake and begin to crumble. Strangers keep falling to their deaths or are crushed by the debris. When the roof and walls break, the strangers start floating into space too. Eventually the powers burst into a beam of light and the city above them starts to crumble as well. Daniel manages to escape as the giant clock emerges from the ground and John floats toward the sky. The leader does the same and throws a knife at John, who stops it with his power and throws it back. It stabs the leader and sends it flying into a water tank that explodes. The alien comes out from the dead body and dissolves in the air. Afterward, John asks about Emma and Daniel explains she doesn't exist anymore because she was given new memories during the last tuning. The memory factory has been destroyed, so they can't bring her back either. John then uses his power to expel the water out of the city and creates an ocean around it. He also begins rebuilding the city as he announces he's going to Shell Beach. Meanwhile, Emma wakes up as Anna, an employee at the local theater. When her shift is over, she takes the bus to Shell Beach too. At the same time, John is approached by Hand, but he ignores him and creates a shore near the ocean before making the sun rise. As the light burns Hand, John goes to the bridge on the shore and reunites with Emma. She doesn't recognize him but still invites him to go on a walk on the beach.